Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to another edition of Movie Goodness here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and we are still in the month of February, which means we are still celebrating Black History. And this episode, the show today, is a kind of a tough episode for me. I'm really struggling with this one, and it's not because of something new or anything that's out of the norm. I guess you could say the majority of everybody know this story, but it's when you really get in depth and hear about what all took place, it really shakes you to your core. I remember hearing about this when I was younger, bits and pieces as I got older, but it never really hit me until this year when I really looked into what took place. Today we're talking about an icon in the civil rights movement, somebody who made a difference not too far from where I grew up, in the city of New Orleans. And we're talking about Ruby Bridges. And the story of Ruby Bridges is so amazing to me, how things get lost, in translation, I guess you could say. But I'm pretty sure we all saw that iconic picture from back then when young Ruby Bridges integrated an all-white school in New Orleans, and she's being guarded by these federal agents to enter school. This is a 6-year-old now, 6 years old, had to have federal protection to go to school. And I remember seeing that picture when I was younger, and it never really hit me, but it definitely hit me differently as I got older, well, it hit different as I got older. And it's just troubling to me. It's troubling on many fronts because I'm a father of 2 daughters. And I guess it just dawned on me when I look at the picture now, and I'm like, that could have been one of my daughters or both of them. And it tears me apart. It really tears me apart, and it eats me from the inside out, because there are so many clueless people who are walking around in this country who still utter the words, we need to let it go. We need to just forget about it. Move on. That was back then. This is, you're living in the past. Well, let me hit y'all with a nugget here. We're going to discuss all that Ruby Bridges went through when she integrated this school. And when you hear all that she went through, all her family went through, I want you to realize one thing. At the time of this recording, Ruby Bridges is still alive. This didn't happen 100 years ago. The woman is 67 years old. This happened 61 years ago. The woman, she's still alive. She still remembers vividly what took place. So you're going to tell her to forget about it and move on? She experienced it. Among countless others who are still walking around here who have experienced what she experienced, and in most cases, even worse than what she experienced. So it's kind of hard to just let that go. So, and that's what really hits with me, that this woman is still alive. And the mere fact that they didn't integrate schools, till that late in time. It wasn't in 1934. No, it wasn't back then. It was just 60 years ago. 60 years ago. 20 years before I was born. It's like like that. You know, time flies. It's really mind boggling that this took place. And what's even more troubling is that the people who were doing these things and saying these things to her and whatnot, they're still alive too. They're still here. And so it's not like, it's over. That emotion is gone, or their feelings is gone, their beliefs are gone. They're still here. They still have the same feeling. Now, some of them, they probably changed. Some people, I'm sure, probably saw the error in their ways and decided to walk a different path. I pray that they have. But let's not kid ourselves here. The majority of them didn't. And the majority of them taught their children the same thing. So we need to do better. We need to do better, especially teaching our children, teaching our children what really happened. We need to stop this Powerpuff Girl version of history. The edited for TV version of what actually happened throughout American history. We need to get to the guts and blood and bones of the reality of what all happened in this country, how this country came to be, how all the evilness that took place to build this country, because it did. You sitting in school when you're younger, and you think that God literally stepped out of heaven and just cleared this patch of land, called it America, and placed people here, and it was just a glorious experience. It was sunshine and rainbows, and that's how it was presented to you in class. Oh, Christopher Columbus, he discovered America and gave the Indians turkeys, and people came off the Mayflower just happy and loving and caring. No, that's not what happened. That's not how it happened. But that's how it was taught in school. Like it was a joyous thing. And just keep it real, man. We need to, if the schools don't do it, we need to do it as parents, grandparents, uncles and aunties and friends, whatever. We need to teach the truth. And that's what it's all about. It's not to teach the truth in order for our children to hate one another or hate others, but it's just to know the truth. Because I feel robbed. I feel robbed as a man, not just a black man, but as a man, period, of how the story of how everything came to be was presented to me in the wrong way. That's like if you are sitting in a restaurant, you go to a seafood restaurant, right? Sit down, you grab the menu, and you open it up, and all they serve is potato wedges. No, you came there for some crabs and shrimp and fish. No, all we got is potato wedges. Well, you presented it like this was a seafood restaurant, not a potato business or whatever. But anywho's, I went on that long rant. The point is, I wanted to discuss Ruby Bridges and her story, her journey, and how important it was for not only black history, but for American history. The burden that this little 6-year-old girl had, the weight of the world on a 6-year-old's shoulders, is an amazing story. And as I tell this story, I want you to realize, I want you to know that a lot of things I'm gonna say is quotes from her, direct quotes from her, her accounts, her experience when she went through it. And so this is what took place in 1960 when Ruby Bridges integrated an all-white school right down the street from me in New Orleans. So we, like I said before, we all saw that image. We all saw that picture of Ruby Bridges walking into this school, got on the little school uniform with her little cute little briefcase or lunch bag with what 3 or 4 black suited men around her who are federal agents, and they had to escort her not just on the first day, every day, every day that she had to go to school. Troubling. Troubling. That's troubling within itself, but it gets worse, and it's because the reasoning behind she had to have protection. The reasoning that she had to have federal agents, not New Orleans PD, no, the federal agents escort her into first grade. But awaiting her at the school gates was a rabidly hostile protesters, mostly white parents and children, plus photographers and reporters. They yelled names and racial slurs at this 6-year-old girl. One sign that was held up by one of the white parents read, "All I want for Christmas is a clean white school." One woman held a miniature coffin with a black doll in it. It had become one of the defining images of the civil rights movement. The confrontation was expected. It was expected to be a riot when she came. 3 months before Ruby Bridges was born, the United States Supreme Court had issued its landmark Brown versus Board of Education ruling outlawing segregation in schools nationwide. 6 years later, those states in the South were stubbornly refusing to act upon it when 9 African-American children enrolled in the Little Rock School in Arkansas in 1957, also known as the Little Rock 9. You can also read that story up. I was debating on doing that one as well, but look that story up. It had caused an uproar. So at the time, President Eisenhower had called in federal troops to escort children through a mob gathered outside the school. 3 years later, it was Louisiana's turn. Ruby Bridges was one of the 6 black students to pass a test to gain access to formerly all-white schools. Yes, she had to take a test in order to get into the school, whereas white children didn't. But the black kids did. Now, we're going to go back to what all she experienced when she went to this school, but I wanted to touch in on the effects or the toll that this brought on her family. Ruby Bridges' parents paid a heavy price for this decision to allow their daughter, to enter this all-white school. Her mother, who had been a chief advocate for Ruby to attend this school, lost her job as a domestic worker. Her father, a Korean War veteran, he worked at a service station. He was a service station attendee. He also lost his job on the account of Ruby Bridges' newfound notoriety. The NAACP, which had played a big part in Ruby Bridges' case, advised him to not go out and look for work for his own safety. Ruby Bridges states, that in itself caused a lot of tension because I'm the oldest of 8, And at that point, he was no longer able to provide for his family. So they were solely dependent on donations and people that would help him out. The local corner store refused to serve them. Even her sharecropper grandparents, who had a farm in Mississippi, Tylertown, Mississippi, if I'm not mistaken, they were made to move from their farm. Her parents eventually separated. Ruby Bridges accounts. I remember writing a letter to Santa Claus and asking him to give my father his job back. And that he didn't have a job because I was going to this school. So I guess somehow I did feel some of the blame. Life at the new school wasn't easier for Ruby. For the first year, she needed federal protection, like I said, every day, since protesters were always at the school gates, including that same woman who had the black doll in the coffin. She showed up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed every day with that coffin. Ruby recounts that I used to have nightmares about it. I would dream that coffin was flying around my bedroom at night. Bridges had to bring her own lunch to school every day for fear that she might be poisoned. The white parents all withdrew their children from the school, and staff refused to teach Ruby, except for one teacher, and that was Barbara Henry, a white teacher from Boston. For the first year, Henry taught Ruby all by herself. Just the two of them in the classroom. Ruby recounts, we knew we had to be there for each other because that's all we had. Bridges had another ally outside of the school, and that was Robert Coles, a white child psychologist who had witnessed the scene outside the school and volunteered to support her and her family, visiting their home on a weekly basis. Coles went on to establish a career studying the effects of desegregation on school children. It later emerged that it was one of his relatives who had sent Ruby her school clothes, which her family could never have afforded. Things changed gradually, Over the course of that first year, a few white parents let their children back into the school. At first, they kept them separate from Ruby. She recalls the principal, who was part of the opposition, would take the kids and she would hide them so they wouldn't be able to come in contact with me. Towards the end of the first year, somehow, on Henry's insistence, Ruby was finally allowed to be part of a small class with other 6-year-olds. 6-year-olds. She recalls an incident where a little boy then said to me, "My mom said not to play with you because you're a nigger." In the minute he said that, it was like everything came together. All the little pieces that I'd been collecting in my mind, they all fit. And then I understood the reason why there's no kids here is because of me and the color of my skin. That's why I couldn't go to recess. It all sort of came together. A very rude awakening. I often say today that really was my first introduction to racism. It was also an insight into the origins of racism. She later realized the way that I was brought up. If my parents had said, "Don't play with him. He's white. He's Asian. He's Hispanic. He's Indian. He's whatever," I would not have played with them. The little boy wasn't acknowledging, knowingly, racist towards her. He was simply explaining why he couldn't play with her, and that's one of the biggest points in racism that I was kind of alluding to when I first started this episode. How this is a taught behavior, man. Racism is taught. You ever see little bitty kids playing like at a daycare or at a kindergarten, and little preschools and stuff like that. You ever see them? There's no segregation. There's no separation of these kids due to color or whatever. They just want to play. That's my friend. They hug each other. They play with each other. They everything is the cutest thing in the world. Cutest thing in the world. It's not till they get older it's when they start to realize that there's something different. You know what I'm saying? So this is the stuff that's being ingrained in these children's mind. It's being taught to them. Oh, they're black. Don't play with them. Don't go around them. Don't associate yourself with them. It is a taught thing. It is a taught thing. Now, some people are just evil and evil. It's not taught, but more often than not, it is a taught behavior when it comes to racism. And that's the problem that we're having today. That's why you can never eradicate racism unless an entire generation dies off all of a sudden, and you pretty much press the reboot button when it concerns race relations. And so it's just I guess you can say it's a tradition. It's as American as apple pie, as they would say, and that's the sad part. It is troubling to really read about that they threw rocks at this girl, at a little 6-year-old girl, as she was walking into the school. These are parents. I ain't talking about the children. These are grown people throwing rocks at a 6-year-old girl, cursing the girl out, calling her niggers and whatever racial slur they could think of. 6 years old. This girl she barely know her colors. She barely knows her ABCs. But she know what the N word is, because she being called it every single day she's walking. She just going to school. You know how crazy it is to walk into a school and there's children in there, but you don't see nobody. You just got to go to your class and stay in your classroom. You couldn't go to recess with nobody else. That's 6. At 6 years old, that's got to be the worst feeling on God's green earth. And this young lady dealt with it. Well, I say young lady, she's 67 years old now, but she was a young lady at the time. Man, I can't imagine. I cannot imagine her going through this. I can't imagine anybody going through this. It's brutal, man. That is brutal. And I feel it's embarrassing to me. And it's embarrassing to me because, I consider myself a New Orleanian. So I feel partially responsible. I wasn't even born when that happened, but I just feel partially responsible. That the fact that this happened in New Orleans is crazy. It's crazy. But I would say to this day, Ruby Bridges, and not to this day, I think she passed away. The teacher, Barbara Henry, they remained close friends throughout their lives. They were always friends because she really appreciated and loved Barbara Henry for standing up and teaching her, because nobody wanted to teach her. And she did. Even to the effect, she took to her so much, Ruby Bridges took to Barbara Henry so much. As I stated, she was from Boston, and she had a thick Boston accent. They have that accent. Ruby Bridges adopted that accent. For the longest, she talked with a Boston accent. That's how close that she got with Barbara Henry. And that goes to show you how important teachers are, and how much of an effect a teacher have on a person's life, on a child's life. Not so much what she was saying, but how she was saying. That's how entrenched in listening to this woman Ruby Bridges was, even to the point she adopted her accent. I thought that was so cool when I read about that. But Ruby Bridges is because she is still alive and kicking. Is a civil rights icon. We hear about Martin Luther King Jr. We hear about Malcolm X all the time. We hear about Medgar Evers. We hear about Rosa Parks. We hear about all these great brothers and sisters in the civil rights movement. But Ruby Bridges, I think, in my humble opinion, had the biggest cross to bear, because she was 6 years old. All the other names that I named, those were grown folks, and they made grown folks decisions. They knew the consequences of their actions. They knew that possibly they could lose their life. That in most cases they did. That their families were going to be harassed and probably murdered, and things of this nature. They knew the risk. They knew what they were getting into. This was a 6-year-old girl, and she didn't know that. She didn't know. She just, all she knew was she wanted to go to school, and had to shoulder that burden. And she did it. Now, she probably did it unknowingly at 6 years old. It wasn't like she realized, like, you know what? I'm doing this for the black people. She probably was. I don't know if she did or not. I seriously doubt it. But it's amazing that act, her family sacrificing their jobs and their livelihoods for this. And it was so important because of what she did. I was able to go to school with white kids. And that's why this hits home so hard with me, because this was right around the corner from me. Because I knew it was a time when that wouldn't have happened in New Orleans. And lo and behold, this happened. And if it wasn't for Ruby Bridges and her family willing to sacrifice their well-being, I wouldn't have been able to take that little thing I take for granted, just going to school with some white kids and and other ethnic groups. I took it for granted. I just walked into school with everybody else, but that wouldn't have happened if not for this. And so that's why this is so important. So important. And there's a movie attached to this. There is actually a Ruby Bridges film. And I remember this film. I remember watching this film, because I think it came on what was it? Wide World of Disney or something? On the Wonderful World of Disney. When they used to have that movie of the week back in the day. I think it was on ABC. Actually, I know it was on ABC because it was Disney. And because this is a Disney movie. And I remember watching this, and I thought it was cool. Even back then, I didn't realize that how close to home this actually hit. But the film is entitled, ironically enough, Ruby Bridges. And Ruby Bridges It came out in 1998. It is a television film, and it was written by Tony Ann Johnson, and it was directed by Ihsan Pricey, and it was based on the true story of Ruby Bridges, one of the first black students to attend integrated schools in New Orleans, Louisiana in 1960. As a 6-year-old, Bridges was the first of 4 black first graders selected on the basis of test scores to attend previously all white public schools in New Orleans. 3 students were sent to Madonna 19, and Ruby was the first black child to be sent to William Frantz Public School. This film received positive reviews and has an approval rating of 83% on Rotten Tomatoes. The film was nominated for several awards, including an NAACP award. The writer, Tony Ann Johnson, won the 1998 Humanis Prize for her teleplay, and the film also won the Christopher Award. It is currently available on streaming service Disney Plus. I watched this when it first came out, and because this is around the time when you, believe it or not, people, young people, for Black History Month, they actually used to show Black History movies. There was actually a time when you would turn on the television and Black History films or Black cinema was on television, mainly in the month of February. And I mean, they played it to a T, bro. You used to, what was it? The King, the little mini series about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Vernon Jones story, or Vernon John story. I can't, now I'm forgetting, but it was James Earl Jones in the role. But so yeah, they used to play that a lot. And countless others. I'm not about to go through the list, but Ruby Bridges came out late. That was around the time when you started to get about 50, 60 channels, and then later on you had about 100, 200 channels, and so on and so forth now. But this was a time when you still was on the edge of TV movies, and this squeaked in. And Ruby Bridges, it was a TV movie. It was a TV movie, and it was very, very what should I say? It was like a Hallmark movie to me. It wasn't you don't see all the grittiness that you would know, that you know took place in real life. This was made for TV, and so you don't get the full blunt of it, but it does tell the story pretty accurately. The film stars Shaz Monet as Ruby Bridges. You also have Michael Beach, Layla Rockham, Penelope Ann Miller, and Kevin Pollak also star in this film. And it's like I said, it's not my favorite. It's nothing that I'll be like, oh man, that was a classic. It was a decent movie. It was decent. I feel that it had that white savior feel to it. You know what I'm saying? With you know, Barbara Henry. It kind of focused a lot on Barbara Henry. Even though it was more of an even split thing, but I think Barbara Henry had a little bit too much screen time for my liking. You know, I would love to see more about Bridges' household and what they were going through, what they was enduring, and they did show elements of that. They did show that in the film, but just me personally, I wish I would have saw more of that than what we got. But overall, it is a decent film. It is a nice film, and I do recommend it, especially if you have young children and you have children that you want to show, or, tell this story to, or show this story to, this is a good bridge into that. It's not one of the one of the harder edge films that you probably wouldn't want to show little kids. As far as as far as slavery movies, and don't want to show them Malcolm X just yet, stuff like that. This is a good gateway into Black history. So I highly recommend it if you have children, small children that you want to really teach them, really teach them Black history, and y'all sit down, y'all watch this movie, and then you tell them what all, yeah, that was good, but there's also more to it. It's this and it's that and it's this and this happened, do your research so you can teach your children that too, because history unlearned is history repeated. And I think this is a perfect film for that. I give it a B+. It is a good Black history film. You know what I'm saying? It's not the greatest of greats. Like I say, it feel like you're watching a Hallmark movie at times, but you got to remember, it's Disney. It is a Disney film. It was made for the entire family. So it is a great family film, I guess, about the civil rights movement and about this wonderful lady, Ruby Bridges, who is still, as I said, alive and kicking today. She is still alive and kicking. And she has become an activist. She's a philanthropist. She's done a lot of work in the movement. She's done a lot of work. I'm trying to pull up. I thought I had it. I didn't. I know I had so much stuff pulled up here, but some of the awards that she received, I can't tell you that. In September of 1995, Ruby Bridges and Robert Coles were awarded honorary degrees from Connecticut College and appeared together in public for the first time to accept the awards. Bridges, Through My Eyes, book autobiography that she wrote, won the Carter G. Woodson Book Award in the year 2000. On January the 8th, 2001, Bridges was awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal by President Bill Clinton. In November 2006, Bridges was honored as a hero against racism at the 12th annual Anti-Defamation League Concert Against Hate with the National Symphony Orchestra held at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. On May the 19th, 2012, Ruby Bridges received an honorary degree from Tulane University at the annual graduation ceremony at the Superdome. 2 elementary schools are named after Ruby Bridges, one in California and another one in Woodinville, Washington. A statue of Ruby Bridges stands in the courtyard of the William Frantz Elementary School, the school which she integrated. She has accomplished a lot throughout her career. I'm not going to go through, throughout her life, rather. I'm not going to go through all the stuff that she did, but she really did a lot, and still is doing a lot in the movement of Black lives. And I'm glad that she has picked up that mantle and ran with it. It's clear to see that this wasn't just a chance encounter with her integrating this all-white school, because this obviously was something that she was meant to do for her entire life, and she's been doing it for 60 years, starting when she entered the gates of that first grade class. And I'm thankful for that. But everybody, that's the show for today. This was rough for me. it really. I'm gonna reiterate. This was rough for me, and you know, I had promised myself that when I did Black History, I was gonna do some upbeat things. Even though this isn't a doom and gloom topic, but it's something that really hit me. It's really disturbing to hear what all took place throughout history with our black people, or to our black people, and it upsets me. It upsets me because my parents are of that age. My uncles and my aunties, and that they went through this. Stuff like this they went through, especially in Mississippi, where my peeps are from. I can just imagine they went through all this. So it really does hit home, And I honestly don't have the answers. I don't have the answers of how things can get better, but I hope and pray that it. I hope and pray that it does. If not in my lifetime, at least before my children pass on. At least they can see better days. I just hope and pray that they do see that someday. I wouldn't mind if I see it someday. But this is really troubling. That this happened not too long ago. This wasn't a galaxy far, far away. This was not too far from me. Actually, I have passed that school several times. I've seen her statue several times. So, yeah. Yeah. That's something else, man. Ruby Bridges. God bless her. I thank God for her. I thank God for her parents for being that strong. Sending their baby girl to this school, knowing what stood in front of her. She had a 6-year-old had to go to class with U.S. Marshals surrounding her to protect her. Utterly ridiculous. Anywho's, that's the show. As I said, this is Black History. Know your Black history. Start researching some Black history. Learn a little extra. You can never stop learning about Black history. Because as I said before, Black history is every day of the week. It's something that a black person did that you probably don't even realize that a black person did it. And so do your research. It is amazing what black people have done and have not been acknowledged for. But anywho's, this is our last Black History episode of the month. I know we have another week in this month, but we got a special episode next movie goodness, and it just so happened that it's coming right before the release of the Batman. So I wanted to do another Black History episode, but I also wanted to do this one too. And this is an episode that I've been holding back on since I started this podcast. And I'm not going to hold back. And I have to do it before the release of the Batman. So next week, a little sneak preview, everybody. Next week's episode of Movie Goodness, we're going to count down the best Batman performances. Not really going to say films, but performances. And in anticipation of the release of the Batman. So everybody, as always, don't forget, if you're listening on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, don't forget to leave those 5-star ratings and leave your reviews. It helps the show out tremendously. Don't forget, if you're listening on Spotify, follow the show, share the show, and whatever platform you're listening to, because we are everywhere, whether it's iHeartRadio, Pandora, Apple I mean, not Apple, but Amazon, Amazon Music, tune in. We're everywhere, peoples. Look us up on social media, KB Radio Network. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your enemies. Check out the KB Radio Network. It has been an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to talk to you today about the great Ruby Bridges. I wish her Godspeed. I hope she lives forever. I want to meet her one day. I really do. I really want to meet her. Her story is so powerful. But everybody, always remember, always know this. I love you. Continue to live one another. And until we speak again, I want you all to be blessed.